The organisms that we find in the ecosystem have various roles. And those roles we actually give a special name to. We call them niches. So you have niche and then plural as niches. And a niche is just where you find an organism. And you can kind of relate it to food chains. You know, are they at the beginning of the food chain, the top of the food chain? And at least in this unit, we'll talk more about their feeding, but a niche also includes when are they breeding, what time of year, where do they live, pretty much every single thing, like how do we place this species, where is it, how does it live, how does it do everything. But we'll explore more of feeding habits in this unit and kind of the connectedness between everything. A lot of this should hopefully be reviewed. So the first group of organisms we'll talk about are our producers. They are getting energy from the sun, so they're not eating anything. And most of these organisms are green. The reason they're green is because they have a chemical in their leaves called chlorophyll. And I think I have this written on another slide as well. This is a green pigment that actually captures the sunlight. And because producers are capturing sunlight, they're all sharing this pigment. Now, this isn't just things on land. So we saw the grass down here, we see these trees, but it's also considering this. You might know this as pond scum, but this pond scum is pretty important. This pond scum is algae. So algae. Algae is similar to a plant, but it's tied to the water. And in this case, it's floating on the water. But incredibly important. So I just want to make sure that you're not forgetting about our, plants on water. Because remember, Earth is covered in 70+% of water. So these actually make a great proportion of our producers on Earth. Now that process of gathering energy from the sun is a process called photosynthesis. Photo means light, so in this case sunlight, but you probably have had plants inside. Regular light works too. And then synthesis. Synthesis means to make something. So plants undergo making something out of sunlight. Now you maybe don't remember the exact chemicals or anything of photosynthesis, but a lot of it is just what do plants need? Plants need water, they need sunlight, and the last one, which you may forget, is carbon dioxide. So let's talk about each of those. Talk about that carbon dioxide, or CO2. So you have carbon, di means two, and then oxygen. So carbon dioxide. This is coming from the atmosphere. CO2 is in the air around us. And plants actually have these mouths, so to speak, that will open and close to let carbon dioxide in. Plants also need sunlight. Remember, there is that chemical called chlorophyll. That chlorophyll is going to gather the sunlight. And really, it's using that sunlight as an energy source. Now, we as humans, we don't use sunlight as energy. We use food as energy. But for plants, sunlight is their energy source. And then finally, water. You have to water your plants. If you don't water your plants die. That water, mostly gathered by the roots, that's the function of the roots, whereas the leaves, which is why I have it pictured here, is for photosynthesis. That water is needed for photosynthesis and for general health of the plant. So all of this is occurring in a plant organelle called the chloroplast. An organelle is just part of the plant cell. There's one piece of the plant cell. Maybe you've heard of the nucleus. The nucleus is part of a plant cell and animal cells as well. So the chloroplast is where all of this is happening. The chloroplast takes in carbon dioxide, it's taking in sunlight, and it's absorbing up that water. And what does it make? What is the result of this photosynthesis? So the major one is glucose. Glucose is the C6H12O6. Glucose is a sugar. It's not like table sugar that we buy at the store, but it's actually fairly similar to that. Now this sugar isn't just like released by the plants. Those sugars, make up the plant. That's how the plant gets taller, has more roots, makes more leaves, makes flowers, makes fruits, etc. It is incorporated into the plant. And when we eat plants, that's what we're eating. We're eating that glucose. It also makes oxygen. So plants are a great source of oxygen. Actually, plants are the most important source of oxygen. Before plants ruled the earth, oxygen was not high enough to support any kind of animal, including us. So thank you, plants, for making Earth livable. This oxygen also comes out of those little mouths in the plants. So those little mouths take in carbon dioxide and will release oxygen. Now remember earlier when I mentioned algae? Algae is a type of phytoplankton. So plankton is just a really small organism, and phyto means light. So it's a really small organism using light. So when I talked about algae, algae is a type of phytoplankton. Did you know half of all oxygen on Earth is from those algae? Half. And the other half coming from our land plants. So although you and I see land plants everywhere, and they do contribute a good amount of oxygen, just don't forget about the oceans. Don't forget about our rivers and our ponds. They have so much life in there that is also undergoing photosynthesis, also creating sugars, also creating oxygen, and creating so much oxygen so that we can live here on Earth. Now down here that just popped up is just another way of expressing this. This is the chemical formula of photosynthesis. So we have our carbon dioxide plus water plus light energy. When you have those three ingredients, that will create the chloroplast. Those plants will create this glucose, the C6H12O6, and oxygen. On a test, I'm not going to ask you to balance this. If you've taken chemistry, you're probably like, this is so wrong. There needs to be like a 6 here and a 6 here and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I don't. It's okay that it's not balanced. Also, if you're having troubles remembering that glucose is C6H12O6, you can write either one. If I ask you what is photosynthesis, you can just write the word glucose. That's totally okay.